The wind tore across Fort Holbrook like knives made of ice. Snow drifted in slow spirals across the tarmac, clinging to steel hangers and rattling the chain-link fences. Most of the personnel walked quickly with their collars pulled high, eager to get indoors before the next gust buried them in frozen misery. Near Hangar 4, a young woman knelt in the snow, scraping ice off the landing pad with a worn shovel. She was small, her frame narrow beneath a heavy jacket that seemed 2 sizes too large. Her name was Elena Kade, though most people at the base just called her Doc Kade, if they remembered her at all. Her thick black glasses fogged with each breath, and 2 long braids spilled out from under her knit cap, swinging as she worked. To anyone passing by, she looked like the sort of person who should have been shelving books at a university library, not clearing snow at an Arctic outpost where temperatures could freeze exposed skin in minutes. She never complained, never raised her voice. When soldiers teased her about her size, about her quietness, about how she looked like a recruit who'd gotten lost on her way to medical school, she simply adjusted her glasses and returned to her duties. Elena was officially a backup medic, tasked with filling in when the real doctors or corpsmen were stretched too thin. It was unglamorous work, sterilizing equipment, refilling 4-packs, taking vitals during midnight shifts when the snow howled against the infirmary walls. She never argued, never asked for more responsibility. She just worked, steady as the tide. But there were moments, fleeting, easily missed, when something flickered in her expression. A shadow of knowledge. A memory not shared. Once, when a flight mechanic joked, "Bet you don't even know which way a Blackhawk rotor spins, Doc." Elena had blinked behind those thick frames and answered softly, "Counterclockwise on this model. The torque correction runs right, yo." That's why tail rotor pitch has to compensate during hover. The mechanic had laughed nervously, assuming she'd memorized trivia from a manual. Elena only smiled faintly and returned to cleaning surgical trays. No one asked how she knew. No one ever asked. At night, when the base finally fell quiet, Elena sometimes slipped away to the hangars. There, in the cold silence, she'd walk between the Park UH-60 Blackhawks like someone visiting old friends. She'd trail her fingers along the fuselage, pause by the cockpit, tilt her head at the panels like she could hear the machines whisper secrets. In her bunk, beneath neat stacks of medical notes, she kept a battered notebook filled with diagrams, rotor mechanics, emergency flight sequences, altitude calculations sketched with flawless precision. No one had ever seen the pages but her. To the base, Elena Kade was invisible. Forgettable. A quiet medic who needed protecting. But the truth was buried in her file. A truth no one at Fort Holbrook had bothered to read. And when the storm came, the storm that would leave men bleeding out in the snow, the storm that grounded every pilot but demanded someone fly anyway, Elena Kade would be the only one willing to climb into the cockpit. Because courage doesn't ask permission. It waits. Silent. Hidden. Until the moment the world needs it most. The mess hall at Fort Holbrook was always loud, a riot of clattering trays, shouted jokes, and half-argued stories about missions no one else could verify. But at the far corner, away from the noise, Elena Kade sat alone with a steaming cup of coffee and a folded napkin. She wasn't eating, not yet. Instead, she was sketching on the napkin with a ballpoint pen, a clean, geometric diagram of a helicopter's descent path in high winds. Angles, velocity corrections, torque adjustments, every line was neat, calculated, exact. "Doc Kade," a familiar voice teased. "You're supposed to be memorizing bones and blood vessels, not scribbling doodles." Sergeant Kalbrenner dropped his tray across from her, a grin tugging at his face. He was broad-shouldered, the type of man who looked like he could bench press a truck. Everyone liked Brenner. He was loud, charismatic, always the first to volunteer for impossible tasks. Elena adjusted her glasses, folding the napkin quickly. "Just helps me think," she said quietly. Brenner shrugged, digging into his food. "You're a strange one, document. You work harder than anyone here, and still act like you're invisible." He grinned. "Don't let the guys push you around too much. You're tougher than you look." She didn't answer, only offered the faintest of smiles. Later that evening, Elena was back at the infirmary, running inventory on bandages and for fluids. The night nurse, a tired corporal with bloodshot eyes, muttered, "Don't know how you do this every night. If I had your shift, I'd go nuts." "It's quiet," Elena said, as if that explained everything. At 0200, when even the corporal had nodded off at his desk, Elena stepped outside. The blizzard hadn't yet hit, but the air carried a sharp promise. She pulled her scarf tighter and made her way to Hangar 2. The security lights bathed the Blackhawks in pale orange, their forms hulking and silent under frost. She walked along the row until she found one she favored, tail number 64 to 981. She ran a hand over its frozen surface, then pressed her palm against the cold metal as though listening for a heartbeat. A voice startled her. "Doc Kade? What are you doing out here?" It was Chief Warrant Officer Harris, one of the base's few seasoned pilots. His weathered face carried suspicion as he lit a cigarette, eyes narrowing at her small figure. "Just checking the snow levels," she said softly, her breath fogging the air. Harris exhaled smoke, shaking his head. "You medics. Always worrying about the wrong things. Leave the birds to us pilots." "Yes, sir," Elena murmured. But as Harris walked off, he didn't see her lean closer to the cockpit, eyes lingering on the controls visible through the frosted glass. She wasn't just looking. She was remembering. Because while the rest of Fort Holbrook thought she was a medic, Elena Kade still dreamed in flight paths. And when the storm arrived, those dreams would no longer stay hidden. Morning at Fort Holbrook came with no sunrise, only a gray sheet of clouds rolling in from the north. Snow fell steadily, blanketing everything in white silence. Soldiers cursed as they shoveled walkways, while the hangar crews worked to clear ice from rotor blades already stiff with frost. Elena Kade was in the infirmary again, carefully sterilizing a tray of surgical tools. Her hands moved with unhurried precision, each movement efficient, economical, practiced. A young private burst in, bleeding from a gash across his palm where he'd slipped with a shovel. "Doc, think I sliced myself good," he groaned. Without hesitation, Elena guided him to a chair. "Sit. Pressure here." She wrapped gauze, checked for tendon damage, stitched the wound in 5 quick motions. The private winced but stared at her hands. "You do that like you've patched up gunshot wounds before," he said. Elena only adjusted her glasses. "Skin tears the same way, regardless of what caused it." The private blinked. "That's not the kind of answer a medic usually gives." Before she could reply, the infirmary door slammed open. Lieutenant Marcus Harlow, the base duty officer, stepped in. Tall, sharp-featured, he carried authority like a second uniform. "Kade," he barked, "why the hell were you logged in the hangars again last night?" Elena froze. "I was checking snow levels." "Right. I read the report. Leave the airframes alone. Your clearance is medical, not mechanical." His gaze narrowed. "Stay where you belong." "Yes, sir," Elena whispered, bowing her head. But as he turned to leave, she caught sight of a folder he carried, weather reports, thick with red warnings. The storm they'd been dreading was swelling into something worse. That evening, when the base quieted once more, Elena returned to her bunk. She opened her notebook, flipping past diagrams of flight instruments, landing vectors, emergency rescue maneuvers. Her pencil hovered, then began sketching the rough outlines of a valley, dense pine forest, narrow ridges, a frozen riverbed running jagged between them. She shaded in a potential landing zone, marked wind shear probabilities, cross-checked them with memory. Her bunkmate, Corporal Janice Rayner, leaned over. "You ever think of sharing what you're really drawing in there? Because that doesn't look like bones or muscles." Elena closed the notebook softly. "It's just a way to keep my mind busy." Rayner raised an eyebrow. "You're strange, Kade. But I think there's more to you than you let on." Elena only smiled faintly, turning off her lamp. Outside, the wind howled louder, carrying snow like shards of glass. Somewhere deep inside, Elena's pulse quickened. She didn't know when, or how, but she felt it coming. The storm wasn't just weather. It was a test. And when it struck, she would no longer have the luxury of hiding. By the next morning, Fort Holbrook was swallowed by white. Snow hammered the base in relentless sheets, blurring the horizon until hangars, barracks, and even the control tower looked like ghosts in the storm. The radio in operations crackled all day with reports from convoys stuck on ice roads, patrols delayed, and medical requests piling up from remote outposts. Lieutenant Harlow barked orders through the static, his frustration mounting with every call. Elena Kade spent the day running between the infirmary and the hangars, tending to frostbite cases and minor injuries from crews struggling against the weather. Every step outside was like walking into a wall of knives. Her scarf froze solid within minutes, her glasses fogging until she had to wipe them barehanded just to see. Late in the afternoon, as she cleaned down an exam table, the intercom snapped to life. Medical standby. Possible mass casualty. Repeat, standby. The room went still. A medic beside her muttered, "Not today! Not in this mess." Elena's hand paused on the cloth. Something inside her tightened. Minutes later, Sergeant Brenner appeared in the infirmary doorway, his usually jovial face grim. "Ambulance from Outpost West skidded off the forest road. 4 wounded. Radio says they're pinned in the wreck. Visibility near zero." The staff swore under their breath. Every qualified pilot was grounded by weather orders. Medevac was impossible. Harlow stormed into the room, his voice sharp. "We'll send ground transport. Takes 3 hours minimum." Brenner shook his head. "They don't have 3 hours, sir." Harlow's jaw tightened. "We're not risking a bird in this storm. That's final." In the corner, Elena spoke, so softly most didn't catch it at first. "We can't wait." Heads turned. She adjusted her glasses, her braids slipping loose against her shoulders. "If we delay, they'll bleed out before sunrise." Harlow's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you suggesting, Kade?" For a heartbeat, silence pressed heavy in the room. Then she said it. "I can fly." The words hung there, absurd against the howling wind outside. A few medics chuckled nervously. Someone muttered, "She's lost it." But Brenner didn't laugh. He stared at her, really stared. "What did you just say?" Elena held his gaze. "I can fly the UH-60. The infirmary seemed to exhale as one, disbelieving. Harlow's face twisted with irritation. "Kade, this isn't a game. You're a backup medic, not a pilot." Elena adjusted her glasses again, her voice steady. "Those men are dying. And waiting for clearance won't change that." For the first time since arriving at Fort Holbrook, Elena didn't bow her head. She stood, small but unshaken, as snow rattled against the infirmary windows. And in that moment, Brenner wasn't sure whether he was staring at the quiet medic he thought he knew, or someone else entirely. Lieutenant Harlow's laughter was sharp and humorless. "You fly a Blackhawk?" He shook his head, as though the absurdity spoke for itself. "Doc Kade, you'll sit down and stay out of this." But Elena didn't sit. Her hands trembled faintly at her sides, though her voice stayed calm. "Sir, 3 of those soldiers have critical blood loss. 1 has internal bleeding. If we wait, ground transport won't matter." "Enough." Harlow's tone cut like ice. "You are not cleared, not trained, not authorized." Sergeant Brenner stepped forward, jaw tight. "Sir, she's not the type to make wild claims. Maybe we—" "Sergeant, stand down," Harlow snapped. The room tensed. Snow hammered the windows, the storm growing more violent with each gust. Radios spat fragments of panic transmissions from the ambulance wreck, voices weak, fading, desperate. Elena inhaled slowly. "Sir, let me prove it." "Prove?" Harlow scoffed. "Do you even know how to start one of those aircraft? You think this is some kind of fantasy?" Her answer was to turn, calmly removing her scarf and gloves, and stride toward the hangar doors. Brenner and two medics followed instinctively, curiosity pulling them along. Inside Hangar 2, the hulking form of Blackhawk 64 to 981 loomed in the shadows. Frost crusted its rotors, ice clung to its windshield. Without hesitation, Elena climbed into the cockpit. Her small frame disappeared behind the console, but her movements were crisp, practiced, hands flipping switches, adjusting throttles, reading gauges with a precision that froze Brenner mid-step. The hangar filled with the low whine of power-up. The rotors groaned once, then began to spin. Brenner muttered under his breath. "No way!" An older maintenance chief, lured by the noise, rushed in. He stopped cold as the bird hummed to life. His eyes went wide. "That's a textbook cold weather startup. Not even my pilots do it that clean." From the operations balcony, Harlow shouted over the growing roar. "Kade! Shut it down right now or I'll..." Her voice came through the headset, steady and professional. "Operations, this is Rescue 1 requesting immediate departure clearance." Harlow's face drained of color. The maintenance chief leaned toward him, half shouting. "Sir, she just ran that sequence faster than anyone I've seen in 15 years. She's not bluffing, she's trained." "Trained?" Harlow snapped. "Where the hell would a medic get?" He stopped as Brenner handed him a slim personnel folder. Harlow scanned the pages. His expression shifted from irritation to confusion, then to something darker. At the top, Kade, Elena M. Tactical Aviation Candidate, Class of 2015. Beneath, Flight Performance, Outstanding. Emergency Response, Exemplary. Disciplinary Note, Unauthorized Rescue Mission, Kandahar Province. Training discontinued. Harlow looked up, pale. "God help us!" Down in the cockpit, Elena adjusted her glasses, braids falling loose against her shoulders. Her voice calm through the static. "Sir, with or without clearance, if I don't fly now, those men will die." The hangar was a storm of its own, shouting officers, clattering boots, the rising thunder of rotor blades beating the frozen air. Lieutenant Harlow gripped the railing of the operations balcony so hard his knuckles whitened. "Shut her down!" he roared into the radio. "Kade, that's an order!" Inside the cockpit, Elena's hands moved steadily, her gaze scanning gauges like she'd never stopped training. Her voice came back through the comms, calm and unwavering. "Sir, orders don't stop bleeding. We're out of time." The maintenance chief stood below, shielding his face from the snow kicked up by the spinning blades. He shouted up at Harlow. "Lieutenant, she knows exactly what she's doing. That bird's ready to fly. This is insanity." Harlow snapped. "She's a medic, not a pilot." Brenner, planted firmly beside the chief, barked back. "Sir, she's both. And she's the only one here willing to try." For a heartbeat, the hangar seemed to hold its breath. The storm outside howled like some ancient beast, rattling the steel walls. Radios hissed with broken voices from the wrecked ambulance, fading weaker by the minute. Finally, Harlow grabbed the comm mic, his voice shaking between fury and fear. "Rescue 1, you are cleared for emergency departure. God help us all." Elena's reply was simple. "Copy, Rescue 1 lifting." The UH-60 surged upward, snow exploding outward in violent swirls. The hangar shook as the Blackhawk rose, nose tilting toward the storm. Soldiers shielded their eyes, staring in stunned silence as the medic they'd all overlooked disappeared into the white void. Up in operations, Harlow's communications officer handed him a printed file, face pale. "Sir, you need to see this." Harlow scanned quickly. Classified entries, blacked-out paragraphs, a record buried years ago. It told a story of a young pilot candidate, Elena Kade, who disobeyed orders during a flood in Kandahar, stealing a training bird to rescue civilians trapped in rising waters. 17 lives saved. Official reason for dismissal: insubordination. Harlow's throat tightened. He remembered the case. He remembered the scandal. He never imagined the quiet medic with braids and fog glasses was her. Through the static, her voice crackled in. "Operations, Rescue 1 entering storm front. visibility near zero. Adjusting altitude to tree line. I'll maintain comms as long as I can. The comms officer swallowed hard. Sir, she's flying blind. No, Brenner said softly, staring out at the swirling white sky. She's flying like she was born in it. And for the first time since arriving at Fort Holbrook, every eye in operations was fixed on Elena Kade, not with dismissal or pity, but with awe. The Blackhawk shook violently as Elena forced it through the wall of white. Snow hammered the windshield in endless streams, erasing the horizon, the earth, everything. Instruments flickered, warning lights flared red. Her breath fogged her glasses. She adjusted them with one hand, the other gripping the cyclic. Operations Rescue 1, visibility less than 20 meters. Switching to acoustic navigation and terrain memory. Static answered. Elena steadied her breathing. She had studied this terrain for months, traced every contour in her notebook, memorized valleys, ridges, and frozen rivers. Where instruments failed, memory guided her. She tilted the stick, dropping lower, almost skimming the treetops. Snow whipped upward in violent spirals. Her eyes narrowed, searching through the white void. 20 miles west, the ambulance lay half buried in snow at the base of a slope. Its metal frame was crumpled from the skid, windows shattered. Inside, 4 soldiers clung to life. Sergeant Ramirez, blood matting his temple, pressed one hand against the chest of a private gasping for breath. Stay with me, son. Help's coming. Radio said no bird could fly. Another groaned, clutching his mangled leg. Ramirez forced a grim smile. Yeah, well. Sometimes people surprise you. The wind howled, seeping through broken glass, chilling the air to bone-freezing cold. Their breaths came in weak clouds. Each second stretched too long. Back in the storm, Elena fought the controls as crosswinds slammed the helicopter sideways. The Blackhawk bucked like a living beast. She tightened her grip, muscles straining. Her voice was calm in her own headset, a ritual from old training days. Pitch steady. Rotor torque balanced. Wind shear, countered by 2 degrees. Lightning flared behind the clouds. For a moment, the snow lit up, revealing the faint outline of a frozen river below. Relief flickered across her face. Target corridor confirmed. She dipped lower, following the river's jagged path like a trail through the storm. Inside the ambulance, Ramirez leaned back against a cold steel wall, his own strength fading. The private with the shattered leg whispered, "We're not gonna make it." Ramirez closed his eyes. And then, faint through the howling wind, came a low, rhythmic thrum. Rotor blades. At first, the sound seemed impossible, like a ghost, a cruel trick of the storm. But it grew louder, closer, until snow outside the shattered windshield lifted in spirals like the sea rising. The soldiers blinked in disbelief. Ramirez laughed weakly, shaking his head. Damn me, somebody actually came. Elena spotted the twisted metal below, half buried under snowdrifts. Her chest tightened, but her voice stayed calm. Rescue 1 has visual. Beginning combat angled descent. She tilted the Blackhawk sharply, dropping fast toward the wreck. It was a landing maneuver long forgotten, one only taught in combat zones before the year 2000. Dangerous. Precise. And it was the only way down through the storm. The descent was brutal. Wind clawed at the Blackhawk, shoving it sideways, forcing Elena to fight the stick with both hands. Warnings screamed from the console: stall, rotor stress, low altitude. Not yet, she whispered, teeth clenched. Hold together. The ground rushed up, a blur of snow and broken rock. She flared the nose at the last second, kicking hard on the pedals. The bird slammed onto the slope with a jolt that rattled her teeth. Skids bit into ice, then held. Elena exhaled sharply. Rescue 1, touchdown achieved. Coordinates locked. No answer from ops. Just static. She didn't wait. Helmet off, headset dropped, she grabbed the emergency med pack stowed behind the cockpit. Wind tore at the hangar issue jacket as she shoved the side door open. The blizzard swallowed her instantly. Snow stung her face, plastered her braids to her cheeks. The sound of the rotors above blurred into the storm's roar. She leaned into the wind, boots sinking deep, each step a battle. Ahead, the ambulance wreck was barely visible, a dark shape half buried, 20 meters upslope. Inside the wreck, Ramirez heard the helicopter settle, then the door slam. He strained to listen through the storm, barely believing. A shadow appeared in the swirling snow. Small, steady, deliberate. Private Lewis whispered, "That's not possible." The shadow drew closer, until the storm revealed her face, glasses fogged, hair whipped loose, medevac strapped across her shoulders. "Evening, boys," Elena said, voice calm despite the gale. "Let's get you out of here." She ducked inside, scanning fast. One soldier pale with blood loss. Another's leg twisted wrong. Ramirez pressing a makeshift bandage that had long since failed. Her hands moved without hesitation. Tourniquet on the shattered leg. Pressure dressing on the chest wound. For bag rigged to hang from a bent steel bar overhead. "Who the hell are you?" Ramirez rasped. "Medic," she answered simply, then jerked her chin toward the Blackhawk. "You've got 2 minutes before this storm buries the wreck. We move now." Back at the helicopter, the skids groaned as snow built around them. The rotors strained, blades slicing the air to stay alive. Elena guided the first stretcher through the whiteout, Ramirez helping despite his own wounds. The Blackhawk loomed like a phantom, its lights barely piercing the snow. One soldier loaded. Then another. Each trip sapped her strength, frost burning her lungs. By the third, her legs were numb, arms shaking, but she pushed on. The storm shrieked, trying to bury them alive. When the last stretcher was strapped down, Ramirez collapsed into a seat. His eyes locked on her, as she buckled in behind the controls once more. "You're out of your damn mind," he muttered. Elena pushed the throttle forward, jaw set. "So I've been told." The Blackhawk lifted, snow exploding beneath it, as the wreck vanished completely into the storm. The Blackhawk clawed upward into the storm, blades chopping ragged holes through the blizzard. Inside, the cabin was chaos. 4 lines swinging, soldiers groaning, frost clinging to every surface. Elena's voice cut through, steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Operations Rescue 1, 3 critical, 1 stable, 1 walking. En route, ETA 25 if weather allows." Static swallowed half her words. In Fort Holbrook's operations room, comms officers hunched over their headsets, straining to catch fragments. The storm made the airwaves scream. "Sir, she's airborne," one officer reported, pale. "But her transmission's breaking up every other second." Lieutenant Harlow gripped the edge of the console. "Patch every damn relay we've got. Keep her signal alive." The screen flickered with storm radar, thick walls of interference, no clear corridors. The Blackhawk's blip was a faint, jittering echo. Brenner stood at Harlow's shoulder, arms crossed tight. "She won't quit." "But the bird might." Inside the cockpit, Elena wiped her fogging glasses with her sleeve, forcing her eyes to focus on the gauges. Altimeter dipping, fuel burning faster in the headwinds. Her headset crackled. "Q, drop 500, river basin path. Copy?" She slammed transmit. "Say again, Ops." "I lost you after drop 500. Silence. Then a burst of static. Then nothing. Elena hissed through her teeth. "Fine. We do this my way." She shoved the collective forward, dropping lower toward the white blur of the tree line. Branches whipped by beneath the landing skids, close enough to scrape metal. In the cabin, Ramirez gripped the stretcher frame as turbulence tossed them like dice. Blood seeped through the dressing at his temple, but his eyes stayed fixed on Elena's back. "She's flying through hell itself," he muttered. "And she hasn't flinched once." One of the privates groaned, whispering, "I thought she was just a medic." Ramirez gave a tired smile. "She's whatever the moment needs her to be." At Fort Holbrook, alarms flared. Her transponder signal had vanished. "She's gone, sir!" the comms officer cried. "Signal blackout, complete!" The room froze. Harlow's jaw tightened, throat dry. She's not gone. She's still out there. He leaned closer to the console, whispering as though she could hear. Come on, Kade. Bring them home. In the storm's heart, Elena gritted her teeth as the Blackhawk bucked hard, nearly rolling. She hauled the stick back, muscles screaming. The helicopter groaned but leveled, just above the treetops. Her lips moved silently, the words only for herself. 1 more mile. Just 1 more mile. The storm clung to her like a living thing, clawing at every inch of the Blackhawk, but Elena held her line. The treetops blurred beneath, the river winding like a ghostly ribbon guiding her forward. Then, faint through the static, the calms crackled alive. Rescue 1, bearing 215, you're clear, home stretch. Elena almost laughed. Almost. She tightened her grip and pulled the Blackhawk higher, angling toward the flicker of runway lights piercing the snow ahead. At Fort Holbrook, men and women crowded the edge of the landing strip, faces stung raw by sleet. Harlow stood at the front, eyes locked on the storm. For long minutes, nothing appeared. Then the roar came, low, battered but alive. The Blackhawk broke through the wall of snow like a ghost, skidding hard across the ice-slicked tarmac before settling in a shower of frozen spray. The bay doors slammed open. Medics swarmed, pulling the wounded into waiting stretchers. Ramirez was the last carried off, weak but grinning. She did it, he muttered before blacking out. Elena sat motionless in the cockpit, hands still gripping the controls long after the rotors wound down. Her glasses were fogged, her knuckles bloodless. Finally she exhaled, let go, and pushed the door open. The storm hit her face again, but softer now. The fight was over. Harlow approached, boots crunching on ice. He stopped beside the cockpit, studying her. You were told it was impossible. Elena slid her glasses back into place, eyes steady. Impossible just means no one's tried hard enough yet. For the first time that night, Harlow allowed himself a smile. The Blackhawk sat steaming on the runway, battered but unbroken. And in the storm's fading howl, Fort Holbrook carried new whispers, about the woman with the fogged glasses, who'd flown straight through hell and brought ghosts back alive. The silent medic. And though Elena Kade would never claim the name, she carried it with her, quietly, into the next storm.